Finally, my raise is coming. I said it out loud, maybe too proudly, as I set my portfolio on the table during the promotion meeting. My heart was pounding, not from nerves, but from a quiet confidence. I had worked harder than anyone else in that room, and everyone knew it. Across from me, my husband, the boss, lifted his eyes from his phone for the first time that morning. Instead of pride or support, his face carried something else. A smirk. A glimmer of amusement, like I'd just told a bad joke. Raise? His voice cut through the conference room's sterile air. No, darling. Already gave it to Kelly. The words didn't register at first. The fluorescent lights above hummed too loudly, and my grip on the portfolio tightened. I waited for him to laugh again, to say he was joking, but he didn't. Kelly leaned back in her chair, lips painted red, eyes sparkling with victory. Oops, she said with the kind of sweetness that makes your stomach turn. Forgot to tell you. Forgot to tell me. Bethany from HR, sitting stiffly at the far end of the table, cleared her throat. Her hand slid a folder across the polished mahogany surface with clinical detachment. Michelle, you weren't even on the list this quarter. The decision was finalized last week. The folder tapped twice against the table as Bethany withdrew her hand, her expression neutral but her eyes full of pity. Around us, the room had grown painfully silent. Some stared down at their papers, pretending not to notice. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unwilling to meet my eyes. My husband leaned back, folding his arms, the smirk never leaving his face. And Kelly? She crossed her legs slowly, her new heels catching the light. The same pair she'd once asked my opinion on in the restroom, giggling like we were friends. My chest tightened. Not from the loss of a raise. Not even from the humiliation of being blindsided in front of colleagues I'd led through crisis after crisis. Number. It was the betrayal. The deep, bone-level betrayal of realizing the man who shared my bed had spent weeks training my replacement while encouraging me to rehearse a pitch he knew would never matter. I swallowed the lump in my throat and said the only thing I could. I see. Well, then I'll need the afternoon to transition my projects. Kelly smirked. That won't be necessary. Jasper's already been bringing me up to speed. My husband nodded. Exactly. Kelly's ready to take over. The word ready burned in my ears. Ready? She'd been in the department for less than a year. She'd never handled a client meltdown, never worked overnight through a campaign crisis, never spent weekends salvaging accounts while the rest of the team was home with their families. Ready was the last thing she was. I stood, portfolio still clutched against my chest, and walked out without another word. My heels clicked against the polished floor, each step echoing like a gavel. In my cubicle, a small corner desk piled with reminders of years of dedication, I began pulling my things into a box. The orchid I'd nurtured through 2 winters, the mug from Emma, my daughter, that said "World's Best Multitasker." The framed photo from the company retreat, where I'd been named Employee of the Quarter for the 3rd consecutive time. Timothy, one of my junior associates, appeared at my desk, panic written all over his face. Michelle, the Baxter account needs final approval before it goes to print. If you don't sign off, give it to Kelly. My voice was sharper than I intended. But she doesn't even know the Baxter team. She's never met them. You've been working with them for months, I paused, looking at him. 24, bright-eyed, still naive enough to believe hard work guaranteed recognition. I almost envied him. Then I guess she'll learn quickly. The words tasted bitter, but I forced myself to keep packing. The silence stretched between us until he finally walked away. The drive home was 18 minutes. I counted every traffic light, every mile that took me farther from that building where I had given everything and received nothing. Our house, tucked neatly on a tree-lined street in Portland, looked the same as always. But as I carried the box of my belongings inside, it felt different. Colder. On Jasper's desk, left slightly ajar, sat the Campbell contract, the one I had bled for, strategized for, saved at the very last minute. Its margins were covered in notes, but not in Jasper's sharp handwriting. No, these loops and curves were Kelly's. 6 weeks of notes. 6 weeks of strategy stolen directly from me. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma, away at college. "How did the big meeting go, Mom? Did you get it?" My throat closed. I couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. Not while the promises we'd made about tuition, about her dreams, still echoed in my mind. I looked back at the contract on Jasper's desk. Kelly's notes. My stolen work. My stolen future. And in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. While Jasper thought he'd denied me a raise, what he'd actually done was light a fuse that was already burning. And nobody, neither Jasper nor Kelly, had any idea what was coming next. The box from my office sat untouched on the dining table, its contents a silent reminder of everything I had built and lost in a single morning. I should have been crying, screaming, maybe even begging Jasper for an explanation. Instead, I sat perfectly still, staring at the Campbell contract covered in Kelly's handwriting. 6 weeks of strategy notes. 6 weeks of meetings, plans, and details that were supposed to be mine. The betrayal wasn't just professional anymore. It was personal. My husband had let another woman pick apart my work in the margins of our life, in our home, in the very space where Emma used to do her homework after school. The silence pressed against my ears, louder than any argument we'd ever had. At 6:42 p.m., I heard the familiar sound of Jasper's keys hitting the ceramic bowl in the entryway, right on schedule. His footsteps moved across the hardwood, pausing in the dining room. "You're home early," he said, noticing the box. His tone wasn't surprise. It was annoyance, as if I'd disrupted some plan of his. I didn't look up from the contract. Meeting went shorter than expected. He walked into the kitchen, loosened his tie, opened the fridge. The sound of a beer cap popping against the counter made me flinch. I had asked him 100 times not to do that. It scratched the granite. He never listened. "So, what's for dinner?" he asked casually, like the day hadn't detonated my entire career. I set the contract down carefully. "We need to talk about today. Michelle." He sighed, the way people sigh when they're tired of repeating themselves. "We've been through this. Promoting my wife would look bad. The board has concerns. Kelly was the right choice." I stared at him. "The board has concerns? Or you do?" "Both," he snapped, finally meeting my eyes. "You can't separate personal from professional. You get too emotionally invested in your work. Kelly has perspective. I almost laughed. Kelly, who once asked me what ROI stood for in the middle of a client meeting. Kelly, who leaned on me for every decision, every draft, every deadline. "You mean she has you feeding her my work?" I said quietly. He didn't flinch, didn't deny it. He just sipped his beer and looked out the window like the conversation bored him. Something cold and sharp settled in my chest. For the first time in 12 years, I saw Jasper not as my husband, but as an obstacle. A man who had carefully orchestrated my professional execution, all while smiling across the dinner table, nodding encouragingly as I rehearsed. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Instead, I stood and walked upstairs, leaving him in the kitchen. In our bedroom, I pulled out the suitcase from our honeymoon. The luggage tag from Maui still clung to the handle, faded but legible. Paradise found. I almost laughed at the irony. I laid the suitcase on the bed and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys, heart pounding. Every instinct told me to slam the lid shut, crawl into bed, and let exhaustion win. But then my phone buzzed. A text from Timothy. "Hazelton Hotels is panicking. Kelly told them you quit without notice. They want reassurance. Should I connect them with you?" I typed back quickly, then deleted my words. Not my problem anymore. Too harsh. Timothy didn't deserve my bitterness. Instead, I wrote, "Hold steady. I'll be in touch soon, but not tonight." Instead, I opened a new document on my laptop. At the top, I typed, "The list." And then I began writing down everything they didn't even know existed. Passwords to internal systems I'd built. Client contacts I'd nurtured personally, many who trusted me more than the company. Campaign frameworks that existed only on my laptop. Notes from meetings Jasper never attended. The cursor blinked at the end of each line like a heartbeat. The more I typed, the calmer I felt. This wasn't desperation. It was control. By midnight, the list had grown to 3 pages. I saved it, encrypted it, and backed it up on a flash drive I tucked into my purse. At 12:03, Jasper came upstairs. He paused at the doorway, looking at the half-packed suitcase on the bed. "Michelle, don't be dramatic," he said tiredly. "It's just a job." I looked up at him, my hands folded neatly on the laptop. "You're right. It's just a job. And this?" I gestured at the suitcase. "Just a marriage where my husband humiliated me in front of my colleagues and handed my work to someone else. Nothing dramatic about that." He opened his mouth to respond, but I closed the laptop with a sharp click. The sound echoed in the room like a gunshot. "I'll stay at Margaret's for a few days," I said, standing. "Give us both space to think." Jasper's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. For once, silence was on my side. As I zipped the suitcase shut, a strange calm washed over me. He thought he'd ended my career today. He thought I'd just disappear quietly, like another discarded employee. But Jasper had forgotten one thing. I wasn't just his wife. I was the woman who built that company from the shadows. And now, I was the woman who held the match. The fuse wasn't just lit. It was burning faster than he could imagine. And by the time it reached the end, Jasper and Kelly wouldn't even see it coming. Margaret's guest room smelled faintly of lavender and old books. It wasn't home, but it was quiet, and that was enough. I sat at her desk with my laptop open, the glow of the screen illuminating the clock. 5:47 a.m. Sleep had been impossible. Instead of tossing in bed, I started digging. First stop, my work email. I had less than an hour before they revoked my access, and I wasn't going to waste it. I began forwarding everything important to a secure folder. Contracts, client correspondence, campaign drafts with my digital signature on them. At 6:02, I stumbled across something that made my blood run cold. An email from Jasper to Bethany in HR, dated 3 weeks earlier. "Make sure Michelle isn't on the short list. We need someone fresh, someone less emotional. Kelly has potential. She'll be the face of the department going forward 3 weeks ago." While I'd been rehearsing my presentation every night, while Jasper sat across from me at dinner, nodding, pretending to listen, he'd already decided. I almost slammed the laptop shut. Instead, I forwarded the email to my encrypted folder and kept scrolling. Another message caught my eye. Jasper to Kelly, marked confidential. "Michelle is too invested in her projects. She doesn't see the bigger picture. Keep building on her strategies. I'll help you polish them for the board." I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding. There it was. Proof that my own husband had been coaching her with my work. The clock struck 6:30. My access was cut. The screen went black. But I had what I needed. Dozens of files, contracts, and those 2 damning emails. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and stared out Margaret's window at the gray Portland sky. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overreacting. The betrayal was real. By mid-morning, I was back in the city, meeting Timothy at a cafe near the office. He looked nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder like we were in some kind of spy movie. But when he spoke, his voice shook with anger. "Michelle, something's wrong." Hazelton Hotels called me this morning. They're threatening to pull the contract. Kelly told them you abandoned your role, that you walked out. My stomach tightened. "She's already rewriting the story." "She's drowning," Timothy said, lowering his voice. "She doesn't know the accounts. She doesn't even know the software we use to track campaigns. She's making mistakes left and right, and Jasper's covering for her." The words should have comforted me, but they didn't. I'd lived through enough crises to know mistakes could be spun, rewritten, buried under layers of corporate excuses. But what Kelly couldn't fake was competence, and clients didn't tolerate incompetence for long. "Timothy," I said carefully, "do you trust me?" He nodded without hesitation. "Then keep your head down. Do your job, nothing extra. And if Kelly asks you to do something that feels wrong, document it. Screenshots, notes, anything." He swallowed hard but nodded again. When I left the cafe, the drizzle had turned to steady rain. I pulled my coat tighter and walked without thinking, my mind replaying Jasper's words. Too emotional. Doesn't see the bigger picture. I'd heard variations of that all my life. Too sensitive. Too driven. Too demanding. But wasn't that what made me good at my job? I saw details no one else saw. I cared enough to fight for clients who were ready to walk. I worked until midnight because I knew results mattered more than excuses. And now those very qualities were being twisted into flaws. Ammunition used against me. By the time I reached Margaret's again, my determination had sharpened into something I hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity. I spread my papers across her dining table, just as I had with client projects countless times before. 3 distinct piles began to take shape. The first, proof of ownership. Campaign drafts with my metadata. Presentation decks I'd created, each version stamped with timestamps. Notes in my handwriting from strategy meetings. The second, client records. Messages thanking me for saving contracts, praising my work, acknowledging my role directly. No amount of spin could erase that. And the third, inconsistencies. Receipts that didn't line up. Reports Kelly had submitted using templates I'd built. Expense reimbursements that smelled wrong. Conference trips she hadn't attended. Dinners with clients she never met. The more I sorted, the more the picture became clear. Jasper hadn't just overlooked me. He had actively cleared a path for Kelly, greasing the wheels with company money and rewriting history with her name. By the time Margaret returned from work, the dining table looked like a war map. She stopped in the doorway, eyes widening. "Michelle, what is all this?" "Evidence," I said simply. She set down her bag, walked closer, and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sweetheart, what are you planning to do?" I looked up at her, my pulse steady, my voice calm. "They think I'm gone. They think I'll disappear quietly. But I'm not going anywhere, Margaret. I built that department. I kept it alive. And now I'm going to show everyone what really happened." Margaret's brows furrowed. "And Jasper?" I met her gaze, unflinching. He wanted me silent. Instead, I'm going to be louder than ever. The rain tapped against the window in steady rhythm, like a drumbeat. The fuse was still burning. And with every piece of evidence I gathered, the explosion drew closer. The stack of papers on Margaret's dining table had grown into a fortress. Every note, every email, every receipt painted the same picture. I hadn't just been overlooked. I'd been erased. And if Jasper thought I would sit quietly while Kelly paraded my work as her own, he didn't know me at all. The question wasn't if I'd act. It was how. I didn't want revenge that burned everything down in a blaze of chaos. Number. What I wanted was control. Clean, undeniable, professional. I wanted truth to be the thing that destroyed them, not anger. The first step was simple. Reach out to the people who mattered most. The clients. I opened my laptop and drafted a short, precise message. Not emotional, not bitter. Just facts. "This is Michelle. I've recently stepped away from the company. I want to personally thank you for your trust over the years and ensure a smooth transition. Should you have concerns or unresolved matters regarding ongoing projects, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. Wishing you continued success. No accusations, no drama, just an open door." By the next morning, my inbox was overflowing. Messages poured in from Hazelton Hotels, Finch and Rowe Marketing, even the smaller startups I'd championed when no one else bothered. The theme was the same. Confusion, panic, and above all, frustration. One client wrote, Michelle, why didn't you tell us you were leaving? Kelly hasn't responded to our calls in 3 days. The campaign is falling apart. Another said, you're the reason we stayed with the company after last year's mess. If you're gone, we'll need to reconsider our options. Each email was a spark, and together they were building into a fire. At 9:14 a.m., my phone buzzed, a number I recognized. Hazelton's VP of Marketing. Michelle, he said, skipping any greeting. Is it true? You're no longer with the firm? I chose my words carefully. That's correct. The decision wasn't mine, but I respect it. He exhaled sharply. We don't. Look, Kelly doesn't know what she's doing. Jasper keeps deflecting, but deadlines don't care about excuses. If you're available, we'd rather work directly with you. Independently, my pulse quickened. Independently. I forced calm into my voice. That's something I'd be open to discussing. And just like that, the first domino tipped. By noon, 3 more clients had called. By evening, I had a list of potential contracts large enough to rival the very department Jasper had handed to Kelly. Margaret watched me scribble numbers across her notepad, eyebrows raised. You're building your own firm, she said. Not yet, I corrected. But I'm showing them I exist without Jasper. That their loyalty was always to me, not the company name on the letterhead. She smiled faintly. He's going to notice. I leaned back in the chair, exhaustion pressing into my bones, but beneath it all was a steady pulse of determination. Good. Because I wanted him to notice. 2 days later, he did. It started with a message on my phone. Jasper. Short, clipped, no hello. Clients are calling asking for you. You're confusing them. Stop, I didn't respond. An hour later, another text. We need to talk. Kelly is under pressure. This is affecting the board. I set the phone face down and kept working. That evening, as I was sorting through more files, Margaret appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. Michelle. He's here. My stomach tightened. I walked to the front hall and there he was. Jasper, standing in his immaculate suit, but for the first time he didn't look composed. His tie was loose, his hair slightly disheveled, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. Michelle, he said, lowering his voice as though Margaret weren't in the next room. You're undermining everything. Clients are threatening to leave. Do you have any idea what you're doing? I held his gaze. Yes, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm reminding them who built their campaigns, who saved their accounts, who they trusted. His jaw tightened. You're going to ruin us. No, Jasper, I said softly. You ruined us the moment you humiliated me in that meeting. I'm just making sure the truth surfaces. For a moment, I thought he'd argue. Instead, he dropped his eyes, exhaled, and muttered, You're being emotional again. That word. Emotional. He wielded it like a weapon, as if it stripped me of logic, of professionalism, of credibility. But I didn't take the bait. I stepped closer, lowered my voice until he had to lean in to hear me. Clients don't want emotionless robots. They want someone who cares enough to fight for them. That was me. It was never Kelly. He flinched, just slightly. A crack in the armor. Then he straightened, forcing composure back into his voice. This isn't over. You're right, I said. It isn't. He left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. I stood there for a long moment, my reflection faint in the glass, the rain streaking down the porch light. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. This was no longer just about a raise, no longer just about humiliation in a conference room. This was about rebuilding on my terms, proving that the empire Jasper and Kelly thought they controlled was never theirs to begin with. And now, with every client call, with every email, with every piece of evidence piled high on Margaret's dining table, the balance was shifting. The fuse was nearly at its end. And when it finally reached the powder, I wouldn't be the one left in the rubble. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for the cracks to spread into fractures, and the fractures into collapse. At first, it was whispers, clients threatening to walk, projects delayed, deadlines missed, but whispers don't stay quiet in business. By the end of the first week, the board had convened an emergency meeting. Timothy called me that Friday evening, his voice hushed, like he was reporting from behind enemy lines. "Michelle, it's bad." Hazelton pulled their account. Finch and Rowe put everything on pause. The board demanded answers, and Jasper blamed Kelly. Kelly broke down crying in front of them. I sat at Margaret's kitchen table, my laptop open, contracts spread around me, a fresh mug of coffee steaming in my hand. For the first time in years, I felt steady. "And what did the board say?" I asked. They told Jasper they're losing confidence in his leadership. I let the silence hang for a moment, listening to the rain tap against the window. Losing confidence. The very words Jasper had once whispered about me. Now they were aimed at him. By the second week, the dam broke. Hazelton officially signed with me. 2 more clients followed. I hadn't even advertised my services. I didn't need to. Word spread quickly. Michelle wasn't gone. She was independent, and she delivered. That Monday morning, as I was finalizing Hazelton's new campaign timeline, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Bethany from HR. I hesitated before answering. Her voice was taut. "Michelle, I shouldn't be saying this, but you need to know. The board is investigating Jasper. They found emails, expense reports. They're realizing he's been covering for Kelly, funneling resources to her, even approving reimbursements for trips she never took." I leaned back in my chair. So the truth is finally surfacing. Bethany's sigh crackled through the line. "Michelle, you should have been in his chair. Everyone sees it now I didn't respond right away. The younger version of me, the one who once believed loyalty would be rewarded, would have jumped at that validation. But now, I didn't need their chair. I had built my own table. That night, Jasper showed up at Margaret's door again. He looked worse than before. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his confidence cracked wide open. "Michelle," he said, voice low, almost pleading. "You have to stop. You're destroying me." I studied him, the man I had once built a life with, the man who had smiled across a dinner table while plotting my professional execution. And all I felt was distance. "I didn't destroy you, Jasper. You did that yourself. I just stopped covering your tracks." His jaw worked as if he wanted to argue, but the fight had gone out of him. Finally, he whispered, "I made a mistake." The words hung in the air between us. Too little, too late. I closed the door gently. The following week, Jasper resigned. Kelly was quietly removed. No announcement, no fanfare. Just silence where their names had once been spoken. And me? I signed my 3rd client contract as an independent consultant. No corporate politics. No glass ceiling built by the very man I'd once trusted. Just me, my work, and the clients who valued it. The first time I deposited my earnings into a new business account, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. It wasn't just about money. It was about ownership. Control. Emma called one evening between classes, her voice bright. "Mom, everyone's talking about you. You're trending on LinkedIn. People are saying you're proof that walking away doesn't mean giving up." Her pride meant more than any promotion ever could. I thought back to that conference room weeks ago. The fluorescent lights, the pitying glances, Kelly's smirk, Jasper's cruel laugh. I had walked out humiliated, but humiliation had turned into fuel. And now, I wasn't the woman erased from a promotion list. I wasn't the wife discarded in favor of someone newer, shinier, easier to control. I was Michelle, independent, respected, untouchable. The fuse Jasper lit had burned all the way to the end. And when the explosion came, it didn't just shatter his world. It cleared a path for mine. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's simple. Betrayal doesn't end you. It reveals you. It forces you to see who you really are when everything you thought was secure is stripped away. Sometimes the door you're shoved out of is the very one that leads you to freedom. And as I closed my laptop that night, contract signed, future wide open, I smiled for the first time in a long time. Because I wasn't looking back anymore. You'll sleep on the couch, my husband Daniel said, his voice flat, detached, like he was reading a weather report instead of upending my life. I stood there, holding a grocery bag, my keys still dangling from my fingers. What? He didn't meet my eyes. It's just for a while. My sister's pregnant. She and Jason need a place to stay. You understand? Before I could respond, the front door opened and she appeared. Emily, his younger sister. Her belly was round, her smile brighter than ever. The kind of smile that announces not just arrival, but takeover. Hey, Liv, she chirped, the nickname she'd always used when she wanted to sound friendly. This place looks amazing. Oh, I love what you've done with the living room. She looked around as if she were inspecting a property she'd just bought. Then, still smiling, I'll take the guest room. Jason's bringing the rest of our stuff tomorrow. I blinked. The guest room is fine, but... Oh, actually, Daniel interrupted, spreading cream cheese on his bagel. Emily should take our room. It's bigger. Easier for her with the pregnancy. You can stay on the couch for now. It's temporary. My favorite word in this marriage. Emily's grin widened. That's so sweet of you, Danny. And Liv, hope you don't mind, but it'd be great if you were gone by Sunday. We'll need the space to start setting up for the baby. Her tone was light, teasing, but her eyes? Triumphant. I felt something cold press against my ribs, not sadness, not shock. Something quieter. A kind of numb calculation. This was my house. The mortgage was under my name. The down payment had come from my savings, years of 14-hour days, late nights, and missed birthdays to climb out of debt and into ownership. When Daniel moved in, he'd said, "Finally, a home." I didn't realize he meant mine. I placed the groceries on the counter. You'll both be comfortable then, I said softly. Emily grinned again, mistaking my silence for surrender. That night, I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling while laughter drifted from the master bedroom. Her laughter. My husband's deeper hum of approval. I couldn't make out their words, but the rhythm of their voices told me everything. I was already being erased. The next morning, the smell of breakfast filled the air. My kitchen, my ingredients. Emily stood by the stove flipping pancakes while Daniel scrolled through his phone. Oh, good. You're up, Emily said. Jason's bringing the crib later. We're thinking of setting it up in your office. You don't mind, right? My office? Daniel looked up briefly. It's just temporary, Liv. You can work from the dining table. It's only for a few weeks, I nodded, though inside something twisted tight. I'd built my company from that small office, one client, one invoice, one sleepless night at a time. It wasn't just a workspace. It was my sanctuary. But now it was becoming a nursery. By Friday, boxes filled the hallway. Emily's maternity clothes, Jason's golf clubs. Their things multiplied like ivy, crawling into every corner of my life. I overheard them talking that night, their voices low but clear through the door Daniel forgot to close. She's not going to fight it, Emily said. Olivia never does. She just absorbs things. Daniel chuckled. She'll adjust. She always does absorbs, adjusts. Words used for furniture, not people. I stood there frozen, my hand resting on the doorframe. For years, I'd believed kindness could build bridges. That being understanding was a strength. But in that moment, I realized kindness only works with people who have hearts. not with those who see it as weakness. When I walked into the bedroom later, the wedding photo that once sat on the dresser was gone. In its place hung a sonogram. My reflection in the mirror behind it looked foreign, pale, distant, stripped down to something raw and unrecognizable. The next morning, Emily handed me a list. "We'll need a few things for the weekend," she said brightly. "Almond milk, decaf coffee, prenatal vitamins, organic fruit. You can pick them up after work, right?" I folded the paper slowly, met her eyes, and smiled. "Of course," I said. It was the same calm tone I used in meetings when someone underestimated me, the kind of voice that made people relax right before I outmaneuvered them. She mistook that smile for surrender, too. Most people did. When I stepped out that afternoon, the sun hit my face, and for the first time in days, I exhaled. The air felt sharper, clearer. I walked toward my car, phone in hand, already scrolling through contacts, not for apartments or lawyers. Not yet. For something bigger, something permanent. Because by Sunday, Emily's smug grin would fade. And when it did, Daniel would realize he hadn't just pushed me to the couch. He'd pushed me to the edge of something far more dangerous. Saturday morning arrived with the sound of drilling. I opened my eyes to see sunlight spilling across the couch and the distinct thud of something heavy being assembled down the hall. Emily's voice followed. "Jason, make sure the crib's centered. I want the sunlight to hit it in the morning. It's good for development." The crib. In my office. I sat up slowly, my back aching from another night on the couch. The smell of fresh paint and takeout hung in the air. I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of the TV screen. Hair messy, dark circles under my eyes, still wearing yesterday's sweatshirt. For a second, I didn't recognize the woman looking back. This wasn't just about losing a room or a bed. It was about losing respect. And once someone takes that, they rarely give it back. I walked to the kitchen. Emily stood barefoot by the counter, blending a smoothie while humming to herself. "Morning, Liv," she said brightly. "We made extra if you want some. It's banana and kale. Jason says it's great for the baby." I forced a polite smile. "I'm fine." Daniel walked in from the hallway, adjusting his tie. He gave me a quick nod, not a husband's nod, but a coworker's acknowledgement. "Can you pick up dinner tonight?" Emily's craving tie. I looked at him for a long moment. "Craving," I repeated. He frowned, not liking my tone. "Don't start, Olivia." "She's pregnant. Be kind. Always kind." When the door closed behind them, the apartment finally fell silent. I stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by boxes that weren't mine, furniture that suddenly felt foreign, an air that no longer belonged to me. Something inside me shifted, not with rage, but precision. I'd built my life from nothing before. I could do it again. The difference was, this time I'd take everything they'd built from me. I walked to my home office, what used to be my office. The door was half open. Inside, the once minimal workspace was now overtaken by soft blues and grays. The crib stood where my desk used to be. A rocking chair replaced my filing cabinet. My laptop and documents were pushed into a corner like unwanted clutter. My company files, my client contracts, my consulting projects, my invoices, all tucked into a single cardboard box marked miscellaneous. I crouched beside it, running my fingers across the folders, the ones labeled Peterson contract, Anderson review, Greenwood renewal, work I'd poured months into. My entire business lived in those papers. Daniel had never understood what I did. He used to joke, "You just send emails and people send money, right?" But that email job had paid for this apartment, for the vacations, for his car. I pulled out my laptop, powered it on, and began typing. Emails to my accountant, to my lawyer, Rebecca Lynn, a quiet, meticulous woman I'd met through a client years ago, and one to my assistant, Kayla. "Please gather all outstanding invoices and prepare a transfer file. I might be working remotely soon. Confidential. When you work in consulting, you learn something valuable. Every decision leaves a paper trail." Every paper trail can either protect you or destroy you. By the time I closed my laptop, I'd already outlined the skeleton of a plan. Nothing dramatic. Not yet. Just subtle repositioning. A strategic withdrawal that looked on the surface like surrender. Around noon, Daniel's mother called. Her voice came through the speaker, sharp and self-assured. "Olivia, dear, I heard Emily's staying with you." "How generous of you. She needs stability right now." "She has plenty of that," I said evenly. "I do hope you're being understanding," she continued. "Pregnancy is hard enough without tension. You know how emotional women can be." The irony almost made me laugh. "I'm managing," I replied. After the call, I found myself pacing the living room, noticing details I'd ignored for months. The framed photos of Daniel's family on the shelf. All smiles and perfection. My own family pictures were nowhere in sight. My college degree, once proudly displayed, had been moved to a storage box after our last redecorating spree. Replaced by a painting Emily had given him years ago. A gift, she'd said, to remind you where you came from. Where he came from. Not we. That evening, I walked into the bedroom to grab a sweater. Emily was sitting on the bed, legs crossed, flipping through a design magazine. Jason was in the shower, humming off-key. "Oh, Liv," she said without looking up. "Do you mind picking up the crib mattress tomorrow?" "The one Jason got doesn't fit." I paused in the doorway. "You know," I said quietly, "when you first came here, I thought you needed help. Now I realize you needed a stage." She blinked, uncertain how to respond. "You'll get what you came for," I added. "Just make sure you're ready for it." Her smile faltered for the first time. What's that supposed to mean? But I didn't answer. I just turned and walked back to the couch. That night, as I lay awake, the city lights reflecting off the window, I thought about everything Daniel had said in the past year. How he wanted to simplify. How he didn't want pressure. I'd assumed he meant work. I hadn't realized he meant me. At 2 a.m., I sat up, opened my laptop again, and typed one more email, this time to an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. A friend who worked at the real estate firm that handled our building's leases. The subject line was simple. Need to confirm something confidential about property ownership. I hit send, then closed the laptop. It wasn't anger keeping me awake anymore. It was clarity, because I finally understood. They'd taken my bed, my office, my peace, but they hadn't taken my power. And soon they'd find out the difference. By Monday morning, I woke before sunrise. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic creak of the ceiling fan. Daniel had already left for work. Emily and Jason were still asleep in my bedroom. The sight of their shoes by the door, their coats draped over the chair, and a baby stroller parked in the hallway made my stomach twist. But the twisting didn't feel like helplessness anymore. It felt like ignition. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Rachel, the real estate agent friend I'd written to. "Olivia, I checked the records. The apartment is still 100% in your name. No secondary signatures or co-ownership transfers have been filed. If someone's been implying otherwise, they're lying." I exhaled slowly, the first real breath I'd taken in days. So Daniel had nothing. No legal claim. No right to dictate who lived here, who slept where, or who packed their things. Everything was still mine. The couch, the bed, the mortgage, the air between the walls. All of it. And that changed everything. That day I went to work as usual. My colleagues noticed my calmness. I even heard one whisper, "She seems lighter lately." They didn't know that calm was the surface of a much deeper storm. During my lunch break, I called my lawyer, Rebecca Lynn. She answered on the second ring. "Olivia, you said this was urgent?" "It's about my property," I said, "and my husband's family." "Go on." "I need to review the ownership structure, and I might need to revise my will temporarily." Quietly. There was a short pause. "I assume there's conflict?" "Not yet," I said. But there will be. She didn't ask for details, Rebecca never did. She just said, "Send me your latest deed and marriage license. I'll prepare a draft amendment." And Olivia, her tone softened. "Document everything. Every text, every comment, every purchase made under your roof. You'll thank yourself later, I already had." When I got home that evening, the apartment smelled of garlic and perfume. Emily was at the dining table with her mother, Daniel's mother. They were laughing over takeout boxes, their voices filling every corner of my space. "Olivia," his mother said cheerfully, "we were just talking about how generous you've been, letting Emily stay here during such a sensitive time." "She's been a saint," Emily interrupted, placing her hand over her belly dramatically. "I don't know how we'd have managed otherwise." I smiled faintly. "I'm glad you're comfortable." Daniel walked in moments later, his tie loose, his tone dismissive. "Liv, can you clean up after dinner? Mom's going to stay the night." The words rolled off him like water, casual and entitled. Something in me hardened. "Actually," I said evenly, "I won't be here tonight." 3 faces turned toward me. Daniel frowned. "Where are you going?" "Just staying at a friend's." "I need some space. You seem to have plenty of company here." His mother chuckled lightly, assuming I was being dramatic. "Oh dear, don't take things so seriously. You know how emotional women can get during transitions?" Emily smirked. "Yeah, Liv." "Don't make it weird," I met her gaze. "I'm not making it weird. I'm making it clear." She blinked, unsure how to reply. I grabbed a small suitcase from the closet. Not much, just a few essentials. Before leaving, I quietly unplugged the Wi-Fi router and slipped it into my bag. None of them noticed. When I closed the door behind me, the silence of the hallway felt sacred. I hadn't realized how suffocating the apartment had become until I stepped out of it. I drove to a small cafe near the river, one I used to visit before life became complicated. I sat by the window, ordered coffee, and opened my laptop. Emails, bank transfers, insurance updates. Each click was a small step toward reclaiming my autonomy. I updated all my online accounts, changed passwords, revoked Daniel's access to my business files, and moved half my company funds into a separate account under a new LLC name, LJ Consulting Group. The LJ stood for life, just mine. I wasn't impulsive. Every move I made was deliberate, traceable, legal. By 9 p.m., my phone started lighting up with messages. "Daniel, where are you?" "Daniel, Emily's freaking out. Mom says this is childish, Daniel. We need to talk." I let them pile up, unread. Then I called Kayla, my assistant. "Kayla, I'll be working remotely for the next few weeks," I said. "Set up client communications under the new LLC. Transfer all contract payments to the new account." There was a pause. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's finally getting there," I said. When I returned to the apartment late that night, the lights were off. The place was quiet except for the faint glow of the nightlight in the hallway. I passed the guest room, now Emily's nursery, and stopped for a moment. The crib was still empty. I looked around the room, every inch of it a reminder of what they thought they could take. Then I whispered to myself, "They think I'm moving out." But really, they're the ones being moved. Back in the living room, I lay down on the couch again, calmer than I'd felt in weeks. Because for the first time since that humiliating moment when Daniel told me to sleep on the couch, I had direction. And by the time they realized what was happening, it wouldn't be anger they'd feel. It would be fear. By Tuesday morning, the air in the apartment had changed. Not that anyone else noticed. Emily was in the kitchen, talking loudly on speakerphone with her friend about baby shower plans, while Daniel sat at the dining table, scrolling through his emails like the world owed him quiet. But I noticed. I always did. The small changes, the cracks forming beneath polished surfaces. When Daniel glanced up, he frowned. "You're dressed early." "I have meetings," I said simply, slipping on my blazer. He gave a humorless laugh. "Still chasing clients?" "I thought you were slowing down. I'm not." I left before he could respond. His opinion no longer carried weight. My first stop was Rebecca's office. She greeted me in her usual calm way, then handed me a folder. Inside were freshly signed documents, property reaffirmation, beneficiary update, and a quiet separation agreement template that could be activated at my discretion. I also drafted a lease termination letter, she said. If you want to remove someone from the premises legally, this will make it clean. I traced my finger along the paper. Can I give them 72 hours? Legally, yes. Though emotionally, it might get messy. I smiled faintly. That's fine. When I got back to the car, my phone buzzed. Kayla again. Just confirming. All payments now go through LJ Consulting. Your old business account shows multiple login attempts from an unfamiliar IP. Should I lock it? Yes, I texted back. Permanently. So Daniel had tried to access my work accounts. The timing wasn't surprising. He'd always been curious about how much money consulting really brought in. I'd caught him glancing at my invoices once, pretending it was a joke. The difference now was that curiosity had turned into desperation. That evening, when I returned home, the living room was a mess of baby supplies and shopping bags. Emily stood near the counter, holding her phone out like a trophy. Guess what, Liv? She said, grinning. Mom found a 2-bedroom apartment nearby. Once the baby's born, we might just take over this place. Daniel says he might buy it eventually. Right, Danny? Daniel looked up from the couch, his voice flat. We were exploring options. I placed my keys down slowly. Exploring options? He shifted uncomfortably. You're hardly ever home. You said yourself you might move out. I said I needed space, I corrected, not to surrender what's mine. Emily rolled her eyes. Don't be so dramatic. It's just a home. You can always get another. That was the moment I decided it was time. That night, after they went to bed, I sat quietly on the couch and began collecting everything I needed. Receipts, screenshots, bank statements, all evidence of what had taken place over the last few weeks. I had already been forwarding copies to my lawyer, but now it was time to go beyond defense. It was time to strike. At 11 p.m., I sent 3 emails. To the property manager, confirming my sole ownership and authorizing no additional tenants beyond myself. To my bank, confirming account transfers. To Daniel's HR department from an anonymous address, attaching proof of a conflict of interest between his company's client and mine. A situation he had carelessly created months ago when he used my client's name to impress his boss. That part wasn't revenge. It was self-protection. But I knew it would sting. The next morning, Daniel was on the phone, pacing the kitchen. What do you mean compliance is asking questions? No, I didn't disclose anything. He turned when he saw me, eyes narrowing. Did you say something? I poured my coffee calmly. About what? His jaw tightened. Don't play games, Olivia. Games require 2 willing players, I said. You made sure I stopped playing a long time ago. He didn't respond, just grabbed his jacket and stormed out. Emily appeared seconds later, still in pajamas, holding a mug. What's his problem? Reality, I said. She smirked. Well, whatever's going on, keep it quiet. Mom's coming this weekend, and we're planning to do the baby's gender reveal here. In my apartment, I said softly. She laughed. Oh, come on, Liv. You've got to stop saying that like it means something. I met her eyes, steady and unblinking. It means everything. By Thursday, Daniel was unraveling. He came home late, his tie askew, his expression strained. We need to talk, he said, dropping his briefcase. About what? HR. They think I disclosed confidential information. I could lose my position if this isn't sorted. I tilted my head. That sounds serious. It is, he snapped. You need to tell me if you said something. You know how much I've done for this family. This family? I repeated. You mean Emily and you? His face reddened. Don't twist this. You're being spiteful. I set my cup down and stood up. No, Daniel. I'm being exact. There's a difference. He stared at me for a long moment, trying to gauge what I knew, but I gave him nothing. That night, I printed the notice Rebecca had prepared. Formal termination of occupancy for unauthorized residents. I slipped one copy into an envelope for Daniel, one for Emily, and left them both on the kitchen counter. The next morning, their voices collided in disbelief. "She can't do this," Emily shrieked. "She owns it," Daniel muttered, scanning the paper, his face draining of color. I stood in the doorway, calm, composed, and more awake than I'd ever been. "I said you could stay for a while," I reminded them. "I never said you could take over." Emily's voice trembled. "You can't just throw out a pregnant woman." "I'm not throwing you out," I said evenly. "I'm simply asking you to respect what was never yours." She turned to Daniel, panicked. "Do something." But he didn't move, because for the first time he realized the truth. Every piece of control he thought he had was built on my silence. And I wasn't silent anymore. Friday morning started with the sound of chaos. Emily's voice cut through the air like a siren, echoing from the kitchen. "You can't just kick us out, Olivia." "This is insane." I walked in, dressed for work, calm as if I hadn't just changed the entire balance of their lives overnight. "You have 72 hours, I said quietly, setting my coffee cup on the counter. "It's all in the notice. It's legal, and it's final." Daniel stood by the window, staring out, silent. His phone buzzed again and again. HR, probably. The bags under his eyes had deepened. He hadn't slept. I could tell by the faint tremor in his hand as he rubbed the back of his neck. "Olivia, be reasonable," he finally said. "Emily's pregnant." "You can't expect her to just—" "I expect her," I interrupted, "to leave the same way she came, uninvited." Emily gasped like I'd slapped her. "You're heartless." "Maybe," I said softly, "but I'm also the only one who's been paying this mortgage." She opened her mouth, but I walked past her, grabbed my bag, and headed toward the door. "You'll find the contact for a rental agent in the envelope," I added. "They'll help you find somewhere appropriate." I even paid the first month's security deposit. So, no, Emily, I'm not heartless. I'm just done being walked over. I left before she could reply. At work, I could barely focus. My phone vibrated every 10 minutes. Daniel calling, Emily texting, his mother leaving voicemails full of false concern. I ignored them all. During lunch, Rebecca called. "They received the notice?" "Yes," I said. "Good. Stay calm. You've given them more grace than most would. Don't engage in emotional arguments. Let the paperwork speak. I plan to," I said. There was a brief pause, then Rebecca added quietly, "You sound different, Olivia." Stronger, I smiled faintly. I finally remember who I was before I let them shrink me. When I returned home that evening, the apartment was in disarray. Suitcases lay half-packed in the hallway, Emily crying loudly in the bedroom. Jason was on the phone, trying to reason with the landlord of another property. Daniel was at the dining table, shoulders slumped, staring at a pile of papers, bills mostly. He looked up when I entered. "You've ruined everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Everything?" "My job's on the line. My family's upset. My sister's distraught." "What kind of person does this?" "The kind of person who got tired of being treated like furniture," I said evenly. He stood, pacing. "You blindsided me, Liv. You just went behind my back." I almost laughed. "Behind your back?" "Daniel, you handed me your back the moment you stopped looking at me like an equal. Don't act surprised that I finally used it to stand." His face hardened. "I can't believe you'd do this to me. And I can't believe you thought you could use me forever." He fell silent then, his bravado crumbling. For the first time in months, I saw fear flicker behind his anger. Emily appeared in the doorway, tears streaking her mascara. "You're evil," she said quietly. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said. But at least I'll regret it in peace. Saturday morning, movers arrived. Not for me. For them. I'd arranged it through the rental agent. Two polite men in uniforms knocked on the door. "Moving assistance for Emily Clark?" one of them asked. Emily's face turned pale. "You hired movers?" "I did," I said simply. "You wanted to be gone by Sunday, remember?" "I'm just helping you keep your own timeline." Jason muttered something under his breath, but he followed orders, helping them carry boxes out. Daniel didn't move. He sat on the couch, head in hands, silent. By noon, the apartment began to look like itself again. The clutter disappeared piece by piece, the stroller, the baby clothes, the endless mountain of temporary belongings. Emily was the last to leave. She stopped at the door, her eyes sharp with resentment. "You'll end up alone, Olivia," she said. "People like you always do." I looked her straight in the eye. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who only stay for what they can take. She hesitated, then stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was pure, heavy, almost beautiful. For the first time in weeks, I could hear myself think. Daniel lingered by the window, staring at the city lights. "I didn't think you'd actually do it," he said quietly. "You never thought I'd do anything," I replied. He turned. "So, what now? You think this fixes everything?" "No," I said. "This just clears the noise. The fixing part comes next." He looked lost. "I have nowhere to go." "Then you'll have to figure that out," I said. "The same way I had to figure out how to sleep on a couch in my own home." He didn't argue. He just nodded, almost defeated. When he finally left, suitcase in hand, head down, I stood at the door for a long moment after it closed. The quiet was so complete it almost rang in my ears. I walked through each room, slowly, touching the walls, the counters, the edges of my desk. My office, now empty, looked just like it had when I first bought the place. There were no baby clothes, no arguments, no apologies that meant nothing. Just space. And in that space, I realized something I hadn't felt in months. Peace wasn't loud or triumphant. It was quiet, controlled, real. I made myself tea, sat by the window, and opened my laptop. The city lights shimmered below, and for the first time, I felt like they were mine again. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. Because Sunday was still coming. And that was the day everything would break. Sunday morning arrived quietly, but I woke before the sun. For the first time in weeks, the apartment smelled like coffee again. My coffee. The counters were clear, the couch cushions finally back where they belonged, and the soft hum of peace filled the space like a familiar song I'd forgotten. Still, I knew the day wouldn't stay peaceful for long. At 9:12 a.m., the first call came, then another. By 9:15, my phone buzzed nonstop. I turned it over on the counter, letting it ring. I didn't need to see the name flashing across the screen to know who it was. Finally, curiosity won. I swiped to answer. Daniel's voice burst through immediately. "Olivia, what the hell did you do?" I sipped my coffee calmly. "Good morning to you too." "I just got off the phone with HR," he snapped. "They're suspending me pending investigation." "You sent those documents, didn't you?" "Documents?" I repeated, my tone even. "If your company found something concerning, that's between you and them. Maybe you shouldn't have used my clients' names in your pitches." He went silent. I could almost hear the realization settling in that I'd known all along. "You've destroyed me," he whispered finally. "No, Daniel," I said softly. "You destroyed us. I just stopped cleaning up the mess." He tried another angle. "Emily's furious. Mom's devastated. She keeps saying this isn't you, that you're being manipulated." I let out a quiet laugh. If standing up for myself is manipulation, then maybe that's exactly who I am now. He didn't reply. After a few seconds, the line went dead. I set the phone down and stared out the window. The sky had turned a pale blue, sunlight stretching across the city like an unspoken promise. You made it through. But the day had one more chapter to write. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Daniel standing there, his shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in presence. "I just want to talk," he said, voice low. I stepped aside wordlessly. He walked in, scanning the now empty apartment. "It feels different," he muttered. "It feels like mine again," I said. He rubbed his forehead. "Emily's staying with Mom for now. She's upset. She thinks you wanted to humiliate her." I tilted my head slightly. I didn't need to. She did that herself. He flinched, then took a deep breath. "Look, I know I handled things badly, but you didn't have to go nuclear." I met his gaze steadily. "You told me to sleep on the couch, Daniel. You told me to move out if I didn't like it. You replaced my things, my space, my voice, and you thought I'd just stay quiet." He looked down, jaw tightening. "I was trying to keep peace in the family." "At the cost of your marriage," I said. "That's not peace, that's cowardice." He didn't argue. For the first time since this began, there was no defensiveness in his posture, just resignation. Finally, he asked, "So what happens now?" I handed him an envelope from the counter. Inside were 2 documents, the separation agreement Rebecca had drawn up, and a note with 3 sentences written in my handwriting. He opened it slowly, eyes scanning the words. "You taught me what silence costs. I'm done paying, Olivia." He looked up, speechless. "You're ending it?" "Yes," I said simply. "This marriage stopped existing when respected." He stared at me for a long moment, then gave a small, defeated nod. "You'll regret this," he said quietly, though his tone lacked conviction. "No," I replied. "I'll remember it." He left without another word. The door clicked shut, and the quiet that followed wasn't emptiness. It was freedom. That evening, I walked through the apartment again, this time slowly, with intention. I touched the walls, the corners, the things I'd nearly lost to someone else's entitlement. On the coffee table lay the small box I'd packed weeks ago when I thought I would be the one leaving. Inside were the few things that had kept me grounded through all of it: my grandmother's bracelet, the deed to the apartment, and an old photograph of me from my first year in business. I smiled at that version of myself, younger, maybe a bit naive, but strong. She had disappeared somewhere along the way, drowned out by compromise and quiet endurance. But she was back now. I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched the city lights flicker on one by one. For the first time, I wasn't replaying conversations in my head, wondering if I'd said the wrong thing or been too harsh. I wasn't second-guessing. I was simply existing. At 8:30, a message popped up on my phone from an unknown number. "Emily. Mom says Daniel's staying with her for now. You got what you wanted. Hope it was worth it." I read it twice, then typed back one sentence. "It was never about what I wanted, Emily. It was about what I wouldn't accept anymore." I set the phone down, smiling faintly. Outside, the city kept moving, indifferent, alive, full of people starting over. Somewhere in that movement, I felt the rhythm of my own restart. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. Just steady. The world had tried to shrink me into silence, and for a while it had succeeded. But the thing about silence is, it echoes. And when it breaks, it can shake everything that once seemed untouchable. I took one last sip of wine, looked around my apartment, my space, my peace, and whispered to the empty room, "Welcome home, Olivia.